Create is one of Minecraft's greatest mods ever made, but it can be difficult to start. So this video we're going to be going over a complete beginner's guide to Create mod and hopefully allowing you to create all the machines you could ever want. Now, if you're using Create in a mod pack, a lot of the recipes are going to be different. Some may be disabled and some functionality may not be the same, but generally speaking, this should help you in all walks of Create. This is being done on Create 0.5.1, which is the most recent update of Create, so there may be things in older packs that just don't exist. Alright, let's get into the meat of it. First, mods I'd recommend you download alongside Create if you're just playing a sort of vanilla Create experience is JEI. Just get JEI. JEI is way too useful. The Create integration is amazing, and pretty much if you're a beginner, you need it. Also, don't use Optifine, use Rubidium, okay? Don't use Optifine, use Rubidium. With that out of the way, let us answer what is Create. Create is a tech mod and a decoration mod. Yeah, I bet you didn't expect to hear that. Create has an extensive list of decorative blocks that you can use to make your machines and builds look amazing. And Create has moving blocks and stuff like that to really decorate with. But first and foremost, it is a tech mod that allows you to automate most things in the game, like iron farms that don't use any villagers or slime farms that don't use any slime. It's an amazing, amazing mod, and all the machines are not one-block solutions like Mechanism or Thermal Expansion, but they're things you have to build and power and create. Although it will test your creativity, it will also give you full freedom to do whatever you want. So how do you do whatever you want? Well, before getting started in Create, I'd recommend getting yourself some engineer's goggles and a wrench. They are both crafted with this thing called a golden sheet, which, how do we make that? With our first machine, the mechanical press. Now, the mechanical press is made up of a shaft, an andesite casing, and a block of iron, usually. Of course, use JEI if you're in a mod pack. What I'm going to go over is the andesite casing, because this can be very confusing to some people. One thing to keep note is andesite alloy is the base of pretty much everything for the earliest stages of Create and going into Create forever. What I'm going over is what this means in JEI, because you can ignore deploying since a deployer uses some materials that we're not even going to get into today. Manual item application means place this block on the ground and right-click it with this block. So to make andesite casing, you are going to take any stripped log and an andesite alloy, place the stripped log on the ground, and right-click it, and there you have it. So we've entered the andesite age, which is where we're going to stay for the video. Your mechanical press is most likely going to be your first machine, because the reason you want the goggles is all this extra information I'm getting is because of the goggles. Without them, I get no additional information about my machines, and this stuff is extremely important. The reason you want a wrench, well, there's a few reasons. For one, a wrench can be used to rotate your machines if you right-click them in just the right spot. So if you right-click on the top of this guy, you can see you're rotating it, and if you shift right-click on your machine, it will destroy it and pick it up. Now, in creative mode, I already have it in my inventory, but it is so useful to be able to just boop, 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 and that's for any Create block, even casings. You should scaffolded casings. The next thing you're going to make is this hand crank. In most packs, it's just as cheap as this, and of course, andesite alloy. Your hand crank is usually your first source of rotational power, because while looking at it and holding right-click, you will spin it, producing 256 SU. Now, we will talk about SU in a moment, but for now, just think of it as a unit of power. To make our golden sheets, all we have to do is throw an ingot underneath the block that the mechanical press is, and make sure there's a block space between them. Give it our rotational force, and it will go down and press it for us, and that is how you make the sheets required for the most useful items in Create. Alright, now that that's over, let's really get into the meat and potatoes of SU, rotational force, and how to make machines. SU, or stress units, is a number, a unit of measure, that tells you how much power is being produced or consumed by a machine. In addition to the manual crank, there are 3 other ways to produce automatic stress units, and that would be the small water wheel, the large water wheel, and the windmill. There is one more, but we're not going to cover it because I have a whole guide on it. It's called a steam engine if you'd like to watch that video, but watch it after this one because you're going to want to learn Create first. As most of you probably guessed, a water wheel spins when water flows past it, and we can see with our goggles it produces an automatic 256 stress units, and it outputs those stress units on these 2 gray boxes that spin. That is a shaft. That is a shaft input or output, and it's important to know that. Now, this may come as a shock to some, but the large water wheel does the exact same thing as a small water wheel, just that it's large. Although do take care to actually place the water where it's flowing. It does not matter how many sides are flowing, it just needs to be flowing water touching at least one side of these. And the large water wheel produces twice the amount of a small water wheel at half the speed. Whoa, 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 I hear you saying. You just said it produces twice the amount. But at half the speed? Yes. Stress units and speed are two different things. You can see this is spinning faster than this. Spin speed and stress units separate. Now you can actually place water wheels and big water wheels flat on the ground like so. Just make sure, that the water is flowing in only one direction. If I were to do this, the water's flowing in two directions, it totally cancels it out. No good. So, gotta make sure it's flowing only in one direction when touching it. You may see some old pictures of water wheels with a setup that looks like this, giving 320 SU. You can't do that in the latest versions of Create. If you're not in the latest version of Create, you can overclock a water wheel, but not anymore. And yes, the big boy can also be flat on the ground. Now, something super cool about stress units is that stress units can be added to one another in a stress unit network, okay? They don't have to all be generated at one source. So this is producing 256, this is producing 256, and this is producing 256 because they all have flowing water, and they have just combined their powers. If I use something called a stressometer, which is a machine that will track stress and give you some information about it, if you have goggles on, you can see we have 768 stress capacity. If I break the other two, we have 256 stress capacity. The reason these connect is because of the shaft input and output. They all combine to be one stress network. You don't have to have two stress things next to each other. In fact, check this out. This guy has a stress input, or this guy has a shaft input and output. You can use this guy to combine the two water wheels together. As long as they're connected, it doesn't matter how, these two guys will combine their stress, and you can combine the theoretical infinite amount of water wheels if you want to use the space. Speaking of space, these guys take a lot of it, especially to power things that take thousands and thousands of stress units. You're gonna need tens to dozens of water wheels, big or small. They don't spin very fast. So another early game method of producing power is a windmill. And it's called a windmill, but you don't have to make it look like a windmill. The windmill is going to output its power on the back or the bottom, depending how you place it, and it has a sticky side on the top, though keep in mind you don't actually need slime to make it. When you attach a block to the sticky side, and at least 8 of these sails, it has to be a minimum of 8, nothing happens. That's because you actually have to look at it and right-click it, it begins to spin. And already, at the absolute minimum amount of sails, it's producing 512 stress units at an extremely slow rotation speed. This is how I prefer to make mine, by the way. I really like having these like turbine things, but you could very much go, up in the sky and build yourself a very traditional looking windmill. Just like so. And plenty of people have made really cute designs that you can look at on the internet, but I love my turbines. The absolute maximum you can get with this is 128 of these sails. This is what 128 sails look like, and when I click this thing, look at how fast it goes with 8,192 stress units. So yeah, this does require a stack of wool to make all the sails if you're in vanilla Create, but it's fast and it's powerful. It's definitely the best early game way. Once again, there are steam engines that can produce way more than 8,000, but this is easier to set up if you don't know what you're doing. And that being said, nothing beats the convenience of a water wheel here or there for a small machine, but this is great for powering full workshops and large factories. We know how to generate stress, and we know how to use it by putting it into machines, but how do we move it? Because this stress is kind of useless. I mean, presses and stuff seem to have, only horizontal ways to be powered. You'll find that's mostly the case. Most machines that take in shaft power, only horizontal. The ways you can move your rotational power are shafts, cogwheels, gearboxes, belts that are attached to shafts is how you do it, and chain drives. Well, like that. Chain drives like that. Shafts are simple enough. They just kind of extend a shaft input or output. And this is what I mean, by the way, when I say shaft power. Shaft power is in contrast to cog power. You'll see there are a few machines, like the handy and dandy millstone. You can't power the sides of a millstone with shafts. You can only power it with a cog. So that's the opposition to shaft input. So shafts will extend rotational power in one direction horizontally, or of course they can go vertically. Cogs can do the same thing, but why would you do that when cogs can go sideways like this? Their teeth can connect to each other. Notice how every cog connection inverts the direction of the rotation, like a real cog. And check this out. Large cogwheels cannot connect to each other like small cogwheels can, right? I can't even place a large cogwheel here. And if I place a large cogwheel over here, it's far too far away. Doesn't work in the diagonal direction either. You just can't connect them together. Except you can use them to take a horizontal power and turn it into a vertical power. So that might be a very good way to get some horizontal power out of our vertical turbine windmill. Very useful. Now stay tuned for a secret interaction between the big cog and the small cog. You even get an achievement for it. A gearbox splits power in 90 degrees, or well, all 90 degrees. So you can get 4 directions of horizontal power, or you can turn it into a vertical gearbox and get in one direction of horizontal power, and vertical power comes out of it as well. So a vertical gearbox may also be a very nice way to get some horizontal power. And of course you can chain as many gearboxes together as you like. Belts move power to different shafts horizontally. They're super duper useful, and a neat trick, by the way, is you can right click a belt onto a belt and it will extend the belt. This is one belt. It's not one belt per block. It's just one belt that connects 2 shafts together, and it does not consume the second belt if you do this in survival. If you want to shorten it, right-click it with a wrench. Don't shift right-click it. You'll pick it up. Just regular right-click it with a wrench. This works in vertical fashion as well, and can even take a vertical power and do that with it. And one of my favorite things to do with them is they can take a horizontal power and do this vertically, or diagonally, which is really helpful. It's actually one of the only ways to do this. Annoyingly, however, vertical power cannot be connected diagonally. Add this to create mod. And last but not least, you have the encased chain drives. At first glance, they kind of do the same thing a belt does. They can drag power like this. They can drag power like this. But check this out. Boop. And check this out. Boop. Or boop. Don't worry. I haven't broken the neck of my chain drives. It's just that a chain drive can twist 90 degrees to turn horizontal or vertical power into the other one, which is, extremely helpful. So now we can take our handy dandy rotational force and put it wherever we want, which is, of course, super important for Create. And remember, anything that moves rotational force will count to connecting it into a rotational force network. Let's take a look at our stressometer, which tells us how much stress we have in a network, and just display the absolute power of connecting things together. I'm going to place a vertical gearbox facing this way, and right on top of this side, we're going to see that we have 8,192 stress units available to us. Actually, we're going to do this one upward so that it works the way I want it to. So, 8,192. I am going to connect that shaft to this one. But another principle of shafts, they have to be rotating in the same direction. See? These guys pop off because they're rotating in an opposite direction. Luckily, we can easily change the direction of our windmill by looking at this little square bit on the side and holding right-click and flicking it in one direction. And you can change the direction very easily of a water wheel by placing the water on the other side and having it flow this way. It is, however, easier to, do this. When I connect these two together, you'll see we gain 256 stress units because this produces 256 stress units. So just as a refresher, this is a stress unit network. You can combine different types of generators. They can connect through any means, shafts, belts, gearboxes, it doesn't matter. As long as they're connected, they're together. Want to see something fun, by the way? When I break this shaft, notice that the water wheel becomes slower and faster when I place it back. That's because this windmill is spinning faster than it. If I put a speedometer, we'll see this is producing 16 RPM, rotations per minute. That's the speed at which this spins. This, however, spins at 8 RPM. But when I connect them into the same network, we get 16 RPM even on this. So if a faster network is connected to a slower network, the slower network speeds up and still adds its stress. Remember, speed and stress, very different. Speaking of speed, why don't we talk about that super secret trick that you can do with cogs. Let's say you don't have something faster and you really want that 16 RPM to go up. Well, grab your speedometers because we are going to be gear ratioing. Remember, this spins at 8 RPM, and that's not going to change. However, if a large cogwheel is taking the input of rotational speed, okay? The large cogwheel has to be the input. If we are to place a small cogwheel diagonal to it, notice how it's spinning faster. And would you look at that? 16 RPM off of 8 RPM. That's right, this is called a gear ratio, and it's one of the earliest ways that you can double your speed, and you can reproduce this. One thing you have to do to reproduce it nicely is right-click a large cogwheel with a casing. Not only will that decorate it, but it will block off its face, and that's very important because now we're going to put on a large cogwheel on the small cogwheel, okay? So the faster speed is inputting to the large cogwheel and connecting to a small one. These guys are a little tricky. If I remove the casing, okay? If we remove the casing and continue the ratio, it breaks. It doesn't work. Why doesn't it work? Well, that's because this can't go faster without increasing this and increasing this and increasing this. It's an infinite loop. We can't do that. So block it off, place it there, and you can gear ratio all the way up to 256 RPM. At that point, anything just breaks. One important reason to have a good grasp of gear ratioing is cog power machines. If you look at this, it says it does not have enough speed. It's rotating at 64 stress units, and it just doesn't have enough speed. By the way, I know I've said stress units and speed are different. However, the amount of stress that a machine consumes is directly proportional to its speed. In the mixer sense, it consumes 4 times the amount of RPM in stress units. So it is receiving 16 RPM and consuming 64 stress units. But that's not enough. It's not going fast enough. Luckily, any type of cog power machine, like our handy dandy friendly mixer, is considered a small cogwheel. So powering it diagonally with a large cogwheel doubles the speed. This is true for millstones, who actually have a secret shaft on the bottom, as well as mechanical pumps, who are also cog power machines, as you can see. There we go. Also, notice how cog power machines will power other cog power machines connected at the teeth, like so. So you can chain these guys together. They just work like regular small cogs. Alright, so we can move power and use power, but there's one more thing that you want to do to manipulate your power, and that's either stop it or flip it. Now, gearboxes are really quite good at flipping your power. This is rotating clockwise, but when you place a gearbox, it starts rotating counterclockwise, and that's true for the other side. This rotates clockwise, and when you're facing it, this rotates clockwise, but as you can see, if you go above it, it will invert power. So a gearbox will invert the rotational power on the opposite side. Gearboxes are great for inverting your power, but gear shifts are even more so because they will just have one input and one output. Give it a redstone power, and it will invert your rotational force. Although this block looks very similar, this is a clutch, okay? This is a clutch and not a gear shift, and clutches are very nice if you want to control your contraptions with redstone, because when you power a clutch, it will stop rotational power from coming through it. So you can turn stuff on and off, and when something is turned off, it does not consume stress units. So an early game way to manage your stress units is by turning things off with a clutch. Alright, let's talk a little bit about item transportation, because Create has some really great item transportation options. The most basic form of item transportation is a belt. Whatever direction the belt moves in, you can toss items on top of it, and they will move alongside. You can pick items off with an empty hand, or you could wait for them to reach the end of the belt, where they will pop off. A belt that goes into something like a hopper or a quote-unquote open inventory will attempt to place the item inside of it as long as they're on level with one another. In addition, a belt counts as an inventory, so a hopper can pull off of it. A chute is something that Create adds, and it's similar to a hopper, except it can pull 4 items at once, although it does so slower, and it drops items straight on the ground beneath it. It can push items into inventories as well if there's an inventory beneath it, so don't worry about that. And chutes that are chained together work together. You can also use a wrench to decorate them. Oh, and of course, chutes can pull items out of inventories that are on the top of them, and will drop them onto the ground. Or if a chute cannot drop its item, you can see it will store it. And you can see what is inside and what direction it's moving with the goggles. Funnels are like an even more powerful hopper. They can be placed on any part of an inventory, and they have this cute little arrow that denotes what direction they will move items. Something that faces outwards will literally drop the item out directly in front of it, or if it's on top, it will actually shoot the item upwards, giving it a little bit of air, and if it's on the underside of something, it will spit it out straight down. Something interesting about funnels is if there's only one block between there, it'll actually wait until there is quote-unquote space on the floor to drop an item. Just right-clicking it onto something means it will face outwards, but if you shift right-click on something, it will face inwards, and of course it works the same way, where you can drop items into it. Now, it's super powerful is if a belt is facing into or away from the funnel, it will automatically connect to the belt. There's no arrow on this. Instead, it will manipulate items based on the direction of the belt. So, a funnel whose belt is facing away from it pulls out of an inventory, and a funnel whose belt faces into it pulls into an inventory. Still, belts that are placed on the sides work the same way. So an input funnel on the side of a belt will suck an item straight off a belt into their inventory, and if you use a wrench to rotate it, which is something you can do, it will spit items out. Belts actually are inventories, so funnels can be placed on top of and around and all that jazz. They work the exact same way. A single spot on a belt cannot be occupied by more than one stack at a time, as you can see. If more than one stack attempts to occupy a space on a belt, it'll just wait for its turn. But they can move up to a stack at a time. The faster the belt, the faster the items are moved. Now, belts can unfortunately not move items vertically. So if we connect this belt to here and I throw something at it, nothing will happen. It won't do that. If you want to move items vertically, you actually need a machine. You need to use yourself an encased fan and combine it with chutes. This is a very fun and interesting way to do this. The encased fan must be pointed upwards, and the chutes must be connected to it all the way down. You actually have to hopper or funnel items into it. Now, we do need to go and power our friend here, and the way I'm going to do that is with a vertical gearbox here, a shaft here, and a belt. Now, we have to check that this is moving in the right direction, and it is. Fan, push from below, items move upwards. If this was rotating in an opposite direction, it would be pulling items downward and wouldn't move things up. You can also right-click it to see the little fan particles on the inside, and you can see they push upwards, so that's how you know. Now, anything that goes into these chutes will go and blow upwards. The faster the rotation, the faster the items will come out. This has infinite distance. It doesn't matter how long the fan, or how far the fan would blow normally, it will always blow to the top of chutes. And this is extremely helpful because it works the same way. If we had a chest on top of these chutes, it works. Just like that. That item will eventually end up in this chest, but it is slow. But that, of course, is the basics of moving items around your world. Are your brains full yet? Well, don't worry. I've got a little bit more for you. We're actually going to continue talking about the fan, and I'll probably make a more detailed tutorial on fans because they're so interesting. But fans, man, they can do a lot. So you can see if they're rotating in a different direction, they can actually be used to suck, right? They can pull in, and they'll actually pull entities in. But what I really want to show you guys is one of their most interesting features, and this really is something cool they can do. So I'm going to use chain drives to connect them all together in the same rotational power, and they're going to face outwards from one another. Fans have the very unique capability of bulk processing different types of items. So the 4 different bulk operations that you can do with your fans is smoking, smelting, haunting, and washing, and you can see each one produces its own very unique particle effect. Now, smoking, haunting, and yes, as you can see, blasting is what it's called, or smelting, is very dangerous. It sets stuff on fire. Definitely not one to be played with. In fact, I'm going to use iron bars to block the lava because the fan will still blow through that. And any mobs or players that enter these very dangerous beams, you can see, will be affected with all manner of terrible things. And if I was in survival mode, I'd be set on fire. So each of these are different ways to process items. Smoking is intended to cook food, where smelting is too hot. Smelting smelts items, well, a bunch of them at once. Haunting uses magic to convert your item into something else, and washing uses water to convert your item into something else. So you'll see the beef is going to cook into steak, a full stack at a time. However, these items have just been pushed outside the radius of the fan. So something you want to make sure is that the items have something to stop them, because they will move alongside the path of the fan. Now, this can also be a very unique way to transport your items. In fact, if we had a funnel here and a chest here, it would actually push the items into the funnel. And the trick would, of course, be getting the timings correct on all that stuff. But after a little while of waiting, it'll actually cook the entire stack on its own without using any fuel. So there goes the steak, there goes the stone, the sand turns into soul sand, and the gravel turns into iron and flint. This is extremely useful because, for one, it's forever as long as you give it rotational force, and it's also just really cool looking. Pretty much anything that can be smelted can be cooked with the fan and the lava. Anything that is food can be cooked with the campfire. Now, the stuff that you really want to use JEI for is haunting as well as washing, and the way you can check that is by going to the encased fan entry in JEI, right-clicking on it, and you'll see entries for blasting, haunting, smoking, and washing. And you can see all the different types of recipes. Washing is where you get a lot of like item production. Haunting is fun. You can like fabricate items out of nothing. It's pretty much magic. It's super great. Now, do note this won't work. This configuration doesn't work if your fans are pulling inwards. However, you can pull like this. So it will work if it's at the end or near the end of the stream. Ignore the fact that the water and lava are going to flow. Oh, well, that ruins it. I'll just use the campfires to show off because it's easy. You can pull particles over. So the haunting will now happen in this line, and the items will be pulled towards the fan. I also just want to show off these two other machines that are super powerful early game. That's your mechanical mixer as well as basin. They do have to be connected like this, and your millstone. A millstone can crush cobblestone into gravel and has a bunch of other useful recipes like that. Remember, if you want to check what a machine can do in Create, not only can you ponder it, but if you want to look at the actual recipes, just right-click on it in JEI. Look at all the things a millstone can do. Literally a lot. Amongst the insane amount of things that a mixer can do, seriously, this can automate potions. It can also automate shapeless recipes, so like combining dye. Oh, isn't that nice? It's so convenient. And these, in combination with the mechanical press, as well as your bulk operations and item transportations and SU generations, this is the basics of Create. You've made it! And there's still so much more to talk about. If you're confused about how anything works in Create, look it up in JEI and hold W to ponder. You get this amazing menu that will teach you so much about all the little machines that you could use. I love these little animations. And I'll have more tutorials out in the future. I already have a bunch on building tips and Steam engines and so much more. Check out my Create playlist. I may even, in the future, have tutorials out already if you're a future person and not watching this the second I upload it. So comment what guides you'd like to see for Create, subscribe so you don't miss an upload, and let's thank the sponsors. I just want to use this time to say thank you so much to the members of this channel. They are helping this channel and me become closer and closer to becoming a full-time content creator. So if that's something you'd be interested in, subscribe and become a member.